go. Ladies, begin your sun salutations. Pluto and Scorpio generation. Love it.
Women, they have minds, they have souls, as well as hearts. They've got ambition, they've got talent, as well as just beauty. I am sick of people saying that love is all a woman is fit for. Has anyone ever heard of this quote? It's a popular one said by protagonist Jo March in the 2019 film adaptation of Little Women by Greta Gerwig. And what I love about this quote was how it made me feel, how good I felt, and how truly those words resonate to what I try to achieve in this world. It was highly unexpected. It was fresh, and some might say it was controversial. After all, it was directed by a woman. One of my earliest memories was one in kindergarten class where my teacher had placed a piece of paper in front of me blank along with some color pencils. And the first thing she'd asked my classroom was, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I could assume many of you have been asked that question before. But while we realized that there are so many opportunities out there, my logic of it was, how do I think of a job tailored for girls that I would enjoy? And all around that room, I observed how my classmates would present them. And this is what they typically looked like. So, from memory, the boys go for about astronauts, race car drivers, doctors, businessmen, engineers, president, superhero, you know. And the girls would have teacher, princess, vet, dancer. And it was around 2009 at the time. And I feel like there had been some clear segregation with the roles. The boys was more masculine, where the girls were more feminine. And I want you to think of what we could have watched at the time that could have affected this. Exposure to cartoons. We were watching cartoons, right? And I want you to think of the content exposure. Cartoons are films. Films tell stories, and stories are a way of communicating. At a child's developmental age, they'd first articulate the world through seeing and hearing before they could even read. We'd firstly discovered gravity, and then there I was, discovering the DVD player where I would constantly watch Snow White, Cinderella, The Little Mermaid. And what I learned from those movies in the end was Snow White's physical beauty is what saves her. Cinderella is saved from terrible living conditions, not because of how hard she's worked, but because she is beautiful. And Ariel would constantly change her physical appearances to appeal to a man without have said a single word, and then married him. But at the end, they were all damsels in distress who were saved by a prince. So we could agree that it followed the same structure, only with different concepts. Girl has problem. Boy meets girl, boy saves girl, boy and girl live happily ever after. All of which these movies would be directed by a man. Now, I have no bad blood with Disney. That was a long time ago. I love Disney. But seeing how those power constructs repeat as a pattern over and over again was most likely why there was a division in stereotypes. That's why boys wanted to be superheroes or even presidents. Men were always the ones to lead or save, such as the heroic Prince Charming, Superman, Neil Armstrong, the guy who landed on the moon and saved America. What a hero, right? Though, what comes with this, and what I'd like to inoculate today is the notion that these stereotypes are influenced even more because of what we see in films and the people who are working behind them. One of the most common ways of dividing the world is through gender, most of which typically through the origins of male and female. And for centuries, it's always been that way. I'd eventually discovered a passion for the art world, and as many of you may or may not know, I am that art kid. live, laugh, love art. And more specifically, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to tell a story of passion that came from me. The problem, though, I never really paid attention to the man behind the art, most of which I discovered that when you try to search up the best directors on Google, what comes up is essentially this long line of men, men, men. And that was pretty intimidating because they're extremely talented, legendary filmmakers who have been part of a few of my favorite movies. But then the question I had to myself was, why aren't there women out there? Where are they? And I guess this takes us back to those power structures. Traditionally, the film industry has been a male-dominated one. Women do exist, but they're just barely making it past the independent film stage, despite making up 50% of film school enrollments today. And for centuries, movies would be made by male directors, following the portrayals of women that would still have some accounts of being subordinate because of how society was perceived. Women played a role back then. They were the ones to stay at home, not be able to work, prepare the food. And by continuing to create these films, the ones that would constantly be made by men would directly elicit biases towards this one perspective. And this is what film terminology has called the male gaze. It's a pretty popular term. But for those who haven't heard, the male gaze is a term coined by Laura Mulvey in 1975, essentially arguing that women, including the people of color, are put at a disadvantage. Whether that be the lack of depth or lines or scenes they were given, the way that they're put as objects of desire was the problem, and how they were typically interpreted through the perspective of a heterosexual white male. This categorized to satisfy the viewer, the one on the camera and the one behind the camera. One common influence of the male gaze is that it molds a world with extremely unrealistic standards of women, glamorized again, objectified, in fact 4 times more likely than men to be seen in revealing clothing or even naked. I mean, take a look at the past James Bond posters. Whoops. Need I say more? There's also certain factors hindering the equal representation of women on screen. And one that I found interesting was called the fridging effect, which means superheroines who have been either depowered, raped, or cut up and stuck in the refrigerator. Sounds a bit odd, but yes, it's a very common way of women to die in fiction, and it translates as the establishment of female tragedy that essentially becomes our hero's motivator in a movie. We see this to be an overdone trend that traces back to movies such as James Bond, again, Spider-Man, Batman, where the recently introduced girlfriend says her bye-byes before we even get to know her. I mean, come on. There aren't enough female protagonists if we keep on eliminating them this way. Despite being a form of entertainment, the film industry then shapes people's beliefs and opinions of the world and their place within it by portraying men and women a certain way. It reaffirms the misogynistic narrative of the past to the present world, how men think they should look at women, how women think they should see themselves. It was easy for my classmates and I to categorize ourselves into these harmful stereotypes because the way we perceive fictional characters in movies has a direct impact on what we expect this reality to be like. It changes our perspective, and as a result, we have unrealistic expectations. And I know that for a fact because I know it's affected me and I bet it's affected you too. Positively and negatively, films are a hypnotic art. It's influenced many parts of my personality, starting from the way I dress, the way I talk to people, and what tone, and what inspires me. By portraying women in film from a certain and biased gaze, studies have actually found that over and over again, these objectifications have increased a woman's negativity towards themselves. But more concerningly, it has adopted physiological effects for men, for they have adopted an idea that may perpetuate, let's just say, certain negative behaviors. And we don't want that, no. No, we do not want that. Those attitudes are a product of their time. Back in the day, that was okay, but we've moved on to say that it is not. Which is why we need to move on and create a new directive. And we could start here. 3 words. You ready for this? Incorporating more women. In the case of eliminating gender stereotypes, incorporating more women is a vital first step in increasing a female's long-term presence on television and changing how we think about women in our culture. This is a movement towards adequately representing the female subjectivity and desire on screen, and that starts with the storyteller, the director, the keeper of the story. We don't see that many female directors for starters because margins of females working in film are still very stretched. Women aren't given enough opportunities to express themselves. And to put that in context, only 4% of them directed big-budget films in 2018 that had stayed static up until 2019, where the numbers have tripled to 12% regarding the feminist movement. Finally, we comprised 16% of directors working in the top 100 grossing films of 2020. The good news is that of those minuscule growth of numbers, the ratio of 16 to 100, this year in 2021, we celebrate the first ever woman of color, Chloe Zhao, to ever win an Oscars Best Picture for her remarkable film, Nomadland. Yes, yes. The film follows a sexagenarian woman who accepts the life of a modern-day nomad after losing everything in the Great Recession. It was just a wonderful movie that completely disregards the stereotypes and introduces you to this entirely unique realm of people and nature. The question is, how could she have won against the majority of directors who were nominated that day? Did you know that she was 1 out of 5? What is it that we had to offer? Well, at the end, what Nomadland has taught me was that you do not need to own anything to see the meaning and love in life. What Greta Gerwig's Little Women, as said previously, had taught me that despite the patriarchy, women have brilliance in themselves. And even if that was a long time ago. But what these 2 movies have in common are not only female directors, but female protagonists that bring out the 3-dimensional versions of themselves. One that focuses on their spirit, their soul that is realistic, inspiring, and subverts the male gaze. Women make up 49.58% of our global population today, so imagine how nice it felt to see more representation for a change. In fact, analysis coming from earlier this year also found that female-led Oscar films were more profitable than their male-led counterparts, so I think that just proves another point. But I think this is a brilliant achievement. Seeing how well these movies have done to prove to the world that women they have already had strength, but it's just about the way the world perceives them. And while recognizing the urgency and imbalance, last month, Sundance Film Festival had announced Joanna Vicente as their new CEO. I don't know if you've heard, but she took advantage of her position to advocate for what is urgent. And as a woman herself, I'd observed how she's opening more opportunities and doors to film through incorporating more gender, diversity in race, sexuality, and just overall more representation emphasized, especially in their LinkedIn page. Because of that open door, it has become an opportunity for those who differ to show who they are inside and not outside. Those are sort of the initiatives needed to help people like me get to where they want to be without these underlying fear of unethical hassles regarding stereotypical female stigmas. I want to see and make movies, many in the near future, that blur the lines between gender stereotypes. And it all begins here. Cinema is a part of growth and education. It's an extremely important way to deliver ideas, one that is fresh, one that is new, one that is exciting. As a modern society, our jobs is to conjure the best of other people within their skills, perseverance, instead of our differences. To the people watching me today, everybody, if there weren't any realistic role models we could look up to, where are we going to find meaning? Where are we going to find consolation, a sense of morality? Women have minds, they have souls as well as hearts. They've got ambition, they've got talent, as well as just beauty. Let's project that onto our growing generations, to the little boys and girls, to our families and friends. These numbers and actions have taken the filming industry to a whole new purpose, that is to promote better equality, especially for women. Plenty of works coming from female directors have showed us the importance of representation, from races to ultimately gender. Because cinema is a medium of change and influence to our society. And when we start influencing change in our narratives, we create opportunities. Thank you.